The great ring station of Nexaris Prime hung in the glow of a dying star, like a crown made of metal and light. It was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known galaxy. 40 different alien civilizations called it home. Diplomats, traders, soldiers, and spies walked its corridors every day, speaking in 100 languages, making deals that shaped the future of entire worlds. At the very heart of the station sat the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, where the most powerful beings in the galaxy gathered to decide who would rise and who would fall. Ambassador Dren Voss stood at the human delegation's platform inside the grand chamber and felt the weight of 1,000 alien eyes on him. He was a tall man with kind eyes and gray at his temples, the sort of man who believed that words could solve anything if you chose the right ones. He had spent 15 years as humanity's voice on Nexaris Prime, and in that time he had learned to read the mood of a room full of aliens better than most humans could read their own families. Today, the mood was fear. High Arbiter Thalveen stood at the central dais, towering over the chamber. He was Velosari, an insectoid species with a hard black exoskeleton and 4 arms that moved with sharp, precise gestures when he spoke. His voice carried through the chamber like the sound of stones grinding together. Humanity's expansion has exceeded all projected boundaries, Thalveen said. He waved one of his arms and a holographic map of the galaxy appeared above the chamber. Red dots spread across one arm of the spiral like a rash. Each dot was a human colony, a human outpost, a human mining operation. There were hundreds of them. 10 years ago, there had been dozens. At this rate, they will control a full galactic arm within 2 generations. No single species has ever grown this fast. The council must act. Dren kept his face calm. He had heard this speech before in different forms and from different mouths. The fear of humanity was not new. What was new was the coldness in Thalveen's voice. There was no debate in it. There was decision. The containment accords, Thalveen continued, will establish firm boundaries for human expansion. No new colonies beyond the current border. No new military installations. Full inspection rights for Council security forces within human space. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some of the alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Dorvani ambassador, a being that looked like a walking tree covered in moss, turned its sensory fronds toward the human platform with something that might have been sympathy. Dren activated his platform's speaker. High Arbiter, with respect, what you are proposing is not containment. It is a cage. Humanity will not accept these terms, and I suspect you already know that. Thalveen's compound eyes fixed on him. Then humanity will learn that the galaxy is not theirs to take. The session continued for another hour, but Dren barely heard it. Something was wrong. He could feel it the way an animal feels a storm coming, a pressure in the air that had nothing to do with politics. Thalveen was too confident, too calm. A politician pushing a controversial proposal should be nervous, working to build support. Thalveen spoke like a man who had already won. Dren checked his personal communicator under the edge of his platform. No messages from the kids. That was unusual. Kai always sent him jokes during council sessions, stupid little drawings of alien delegates with funny captions. Sarah usually sent him notes about whatever book she was reading. His inbox was empty. He sent a message to both of them. No reply. He sent another. Nothing. The pressure in his chest grew tighter. 6 levels below the grand chamber, in the winding corridors of the lower markets, Kai and Sarah Voss had been having a good day until it suddenly became a very bad one. The lower markets were their favorite place on Nexaris Prime. Stalls and shops from dozens of species lined the corridors, selling everything from glowing fungi that tasted like chocolate to small mechanical pets that followed you around and sang. Kai, who was 14 and built like a young athlete with his mother's dark eyes, was haggling with a 4-armed Drellic merchant over a piece of alien tech that he was fairly sure was a music player. Sarah, his twin sister, stood nearby reading the alien script on a food stall's menu. She was thinner than her brother, quieter, with the kind of face that people often mistook for shy until they looked at her eyes and realized she was not shy at all. She was watching. She was always watching. Sarah noticed them first. 2 Velosari sentinels in black armor standing at the far end of the corridor, pretending to browse a stall, but not actually looking at anything on it. a third one behind them. When near the maintenance access door, she had seen sentinels before. They patrolled the station like police, but these three were not patrolling. They were waiting. "Kai," she said quietly. Her brother looked up from his haggling. He followed her eyes and saw the sentinels. His jaw tightened. "How long?" "Since we passed the water garden. Maybe longer." Kai put down the music player. "We should go back to the diplomatic quarter." They turned and walked quickly toward the main corridor. The sentinels moved to follow. Sarah pulled out her communicator to call their father and found that it was dead, not powered off. Dead. The screen was dark and would not respond to her touch. "They're jamming us," she said. That was when the fourth sentinel stepped out of the maintenance corridor directly in front of them and blocked their path. "Kai and Sarah Voss," the sentinel said in flat translated speech, "you will come with us, by order of the High Arbiter." Kai did not think. He acted. His mother had taught both her children basic combat techniques from the time they were old enough to stand, not because she wanted them to be soldiers, but because she wanted them to be survivors. Kai dropped his weight, pivoted, and drove his elbow into the joint where the sentinel's arm met its torso. There was a crack. The sentinel shrieked, a high insectoid sound, and stumbled back. But there were 4 of them, and only 2 children. The other 3 closed in fast. Something cold pressed against Kai's neck, and his muscles locked up. A neural stunner. Sarah fought too, kicking and twisting, but they grabbed her arms and held her. She did not scream. She looked directly into the nearest sentinel's compound eyes and said very clearly, "You have no idea what you have just done." The sentinel did not answer. They were dragged through the maintenance corridors, away from the crowds, away from anyone who might see. Sarah memorized every turn, every door, every junction. Kai struggled against the stunner's effects, his fingers twitching as feeling slowly returned. Back in the grand chamber, Thalvin called for silence. The murmurs died. He looked directly at Ambassador Dren Voss, and something in his expression changed. It was not guilt. It was satisfaction. "To ensure humanity's compliance with the containment accords," Thalvin said, "the Council has placed the children of Ambassador Voss into protective diplomatic custody. They will remain as guests of the Council until humanity demonstrates its willingness to respect galactic boundaries." The chamber went silent. Not the silence of shock, but the silence of a room full of beings who understood that a line had just been crossed. Dren felt the blood drain from his face. For a moment, the entire galaxy narrowed to a single point of white-hot fury. He gripped the edge of his platform so hard the metal groaned under his fingers. "You took my children," he said. His voice was barely a whisper, but the chamber's acoustics carried it to every corner. "They are safe," Thalvin said, "and they will remain safe as long as humanity cooperates." Dren erupted. He vaulted over his platform's railing and charged toward the central dais. 2 Council security guards intercepted him. He threw one aside with a strength that surprised everyone in the chamber, including himself, before the second guard brought him down. They pinned him to the floor. "This is an act of war," Dren shouted, his voice raw. "They are children. They are protected under sovereign diplomatic immunity." Thalvin looked down at him with cold, alien eyes. "Diplomatic immunity applies to diplomats, Ambassador. Your children are not diplomats. They are leverage." They dragged Dren from the chamber. They suspended his credentials. They confined him to the diplomatic quarter under guard. But they made a mistake. They let him keep his personal quarters, and they did not know about the hidden communication relay built into the wall behind his bookshelf. Every human embassy in the galaxy had one, a last resort device that could punch a signal through any jamming field, across any distance, directly to Earth. Dren sat alone in his quarters. His hands were shaking. His lip was bleeding where he had bitten it. He activated the relay and typed 6 words. The message traveled at faster than light speed across half the galaxy. It passed through relay stations and communication nodes. It arrived on Earth in under 4 minutes. It arrived at a house with a garden, where a woman with dark eyes and steady hands was pruning roses in the afternoon sun. Lyra Voss read the message on her personal screen. "They took our children. Come home." She stood very still for a long time. The afternoon light moved across the garden. A bird sang somewhere in the trees. The world was peaceful and quiet and completely unaware of what was about to change. Lyra set down her gardening tools. She walked inside the house. She climbed the stairs to the second floor and stopped in front of a door that had been locked for 6 years. She entered the code from memory. The lock clicked open. Inside was a room she had promised herself she would never need again. Her old commander's uniform hung on a stand in the center, dark gray with silver rank insignia. Beside it, on a simple shelf, sat a pair of tactical gloves, a holstered sidearm, and a framed photograph of her family. She picked up the uniform and held it against her body. It still fit. Lyra Voss dressed for war. The war room beneath Geneva had not been fully activated in 11 years. It sat deep underground, carved into the bones of a mountain, shielded by layers of reinforced steel and energy fields that could survive a direct orbital strike. When Lyra Voss walked through its doors, every screen on every wall was alive with light. Star maps, fleet positions, communication feeds, and intelligence reports filled the air with a soft electric hum. 20 of the most powerful military officers on Earth were already seated around the central table. They had been summoned in the middle of the night with a single coded phrase that meant one thing: a threat to humanity that could not wait until morning. They all looked up when Lyra entered. She was not in the chain of command anymore. She held no rank, no title, no official authority. But every person in that room knew her name. Some of them had served under her. Some of them had been saved by her. And all of them understood that when Lyra Voss walked into a war room, the situation was already past the point of polite discussion. She did not greet them. She walked to the table, placed a single data pad on its surface, and activated it. A holographic image of Nexaris Prime appeared above the table, rotating slowly. 12 hours ago, Lyra said, the Galactic Council, acting under direct orders from High Arbiter Thalvine, seized my children from the diplomatic quarter of Nexaris Prime. They are being held in a secure detention facility inside the station. The Council is using them as leverage to force humanity into accepting the containment accords, which would freeze all human expansion and allow Council military forces to operate freely inside our borders. She paused. The room was completely silent. Wait, my husband's diplomatic credentials have been suspended. Communication to and from the human embassy on Nexaris Prime has been cut. The Council has not formally declared war, but they have committed an act that, under every human legal framework and every galactic treaty we have signed, constitutes one. Secretary General Harlan Drake sat at the head of the table. He was an old man with a careful mind and a politician's instinct for caution. He folded his hands on the table and spoke slowly. Commander Voss, I understand your pain, but we must consider the wider picture. A military response could trigger a full galactic war. The Council controls 40 species. Their combined fleet outnumbers ours significantly. Lyra looked at him. Her expression did not change. Secretary General, let me explain the wider picture to you. Right now, every species in the galaxy is watching to see what we do. If we negotiate while they hold our children hostage, we are telling every alien civilization that humans can be controlled through their families. Every human diplomat, every human trader, every human colonist living outside Earth's borders becomes a target. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually, because we will have proven that taking our people works. She let the silence stretch for a moment. You can negotiate with people who took your territory, she said. You cannot negotiate with people who took your children and expect to keep your spine. The room shifted. She could feel it. The generals straightened in their chairs. The admirals exchanged glances. These were men and women who had spent their careers preparing for threats that never came. Now a threat was here. Inwer, and the woman standing before them was not asking them to start a war. She was asking them to be what they had always trained to be. Drake studied her for a long time. Then he turned to the chief of fleet operations. How quickly can we mobilize? Far away on Nexaris Prime, in a sterile white cell deep inside the station's detention wing, Kai Voss was losing his mind. The cell was small, about 4 meters on each side. The walls were smooth and featureless. The gravity was set slightly higher than Earth standard, which made everything feel heavy and exhausting. There were 2 cots, a basic sanitation unit, and nothing else. No windows, no screens. No way to tell what time it was or what was happening outside. Kai paced back and forth like a caged animal. His neck still ached where the neural stunner had hit him. One and his knuckles were bruised from hitting the sentinel. He slammed his palm against the wall for the 20th time. It did not even vibrate. "Stop," Sarah said from her cot. "I can't just sit here." "You can, and you should." Sarah was lying on her back, staring at the ceiling. She had been quiet since they were brought here, which Kai knew was not a sign of defeat. When Sarah went quiet, it meant she was thinking. And when Sarah thought, things happened. "They change the guard every 6 hours," she said. "2 sentinels on our door, 1 at the corridor junction. The air recycler in the ceiling activates every 45 minutes, which means the vent system runs on a time cycle. The gravity in this cell is 0.2 above standard, but I heard the field generator stutter twice, which means it is running off a local power node. Not the main grid." Kai stopped pacing and looked at his sister. "How do you know all that?" "Because I pay attention instead of hitting walls." She sat up and pulled a thin metal object from under her sleeve. It was a maintenance stylus she had taken from one of the sentinels during the struggle, small enough to hide in her palm. She flipped over her cot's thin mattress and began scratching lines into the metal frame underneath. A map, crude but detailed, the route they had been brought through, the doors, the turns, the elevator, everything she had memorized. "We are not staying here," she said quietly, "but we are not leaving stupid either. We wait, we watch, and when the time comes, we move." On the 3rd day of their captivity, they received an unexpected visitor. The cell door opened, and instead of a sentinel, a tall reptilian figure stepped inside. Counselor Mira Zelkis was Sithari, a species that looked like elegant lizards with iridescent green scales and golden eyes. She wore the formal robes of a council member and carried herself with the careful dignity of someone who was doing something she was not supposed to do. She looked at the 2 children, and something in her golden eyes softened. "I am sorry," she said. "This was not supposed to happen. The High Arbiter acted without the full council's approval. Many of us oppose this." "Then let us go," Kai said immediately. "I cannot. Not yet. The security around this wing has been tripled. But I wanted you to know that not everyone on this station agrees with what was done to you." Sarah studied the counselor the way she studied everything, quietly and completely. She saw the tension in the Sithari's posture, the way her tail curled nervously, the quick glances toward the door. This was a woman who was afraid, but had come anyway. "Our mother will come," Sarah said. Zelkis looked at her. "I have read your mother's file. She was a remarkable officer. She still is. And when she gets here, you should decide which side of the door you are standing on." The counselor held Sarah's gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly, as if something had been decided, and left without another word. On Earth, Lyra worked without sleep. She stood in the war room for 18 hours straight, coordinating with fleet commanders across human space. She did not raise her voice. She did not rush. Once she moved through the logistics of mobilization with the calm efficiency of a woman who had done this before and knew exactly what every piece on the board could do. She made one personal call on a secure channel that even the Secretary General did not know about. Admiral Rennick Cole appeared on the screen. He was a broad-shouldered man with a scarred face and the look of someone who had been in too many fights to be impressed by anything. He commanded the 7th Human Expeditionary Fleet, the most powerful mobile fighting force humanity had ever assembled. He was also the man Lyra had pulled from a burning ship 15 years ago during the Sol expansion wars. He had told her then that he owed her his life, and she had told him that she would collect someday. "Cole," she said. "Lyra." His voice was rough. "I heard. How bad?" "They took Kai and Sarah. The council is holding them on Nexarus Prime." Cole's expression did not change, but his hand tightened on the arm of his chair until his knuckles turned white. He had watched those children grow up. He was their godfather. "How far?" he asked. 2 words, but they carried the weight of everything. "How far do you want me to go? How much are you willing to break? How many lines are we crossing?" Lyra's answer was simple. "I want them to understand what they woke up." Cole nodded once. "The 7th Fleet will be at the Shadow Line in 48 hours. Over the next 2 days, something strange began happening across the galaxy. Human merchant ships along Council trade routes started changing course. They did not explain why. They simply rerouted, pulling away from Council-controlled systems one by one. Communication buoys near council space began going dark. Not destroyed, just silent. Human-operated relay stations stopped transmitting. Supply shipments to council worlds were delayed, then canceled, then simply stopped. No one declared anything. No one made threats. No one issued demands. Humanity just went quiet, and the quiet was terrifying. On Nexaris Prime, Thalvine noticed the silence on the third day. He summoned his intelligence advisors and demanded an explanation. They showed him the data. Human communications across 3 sectors had dropped by 90%. Human trade ships had withdrawn from 17 major shipping lanes. The human embassy on Nexaris Prime had gone completely dark, its windows shuttered, its staff invisible. "Hey, they are posturing," said his chief advisor, a young Velusari with polished armor. "Humans are emotional. They are making a dramatic gesture to show their displeasure. When they calm down, they will negotiate." Thalvine considered this. It was a reasonable analysis. Humans were known for their emotions, their dramatic responses, their need to express outrage before settling down to business. Perhaps this was simply their way of saving face before accepting the inevitable. An old voice spoke from the far end of the table. Counselor Vorath was ancient, an aquatic being from a species so old that they remembered when the first council was formed. He floated in a gravity-suspended water sphere, his translucent body pulsing with slow, bioluminescent light. He rarely spoke in meetings. When he did, the wise listened. "You are wrong," Vorath said. His voice bubbled through the water like stones dropping into a deep well. "When a predator makes noise, it is warning you. When a predator goes silent, it is not retreating." He turned his ancient clouded eyes toward Thalvine. "It is hunting." Thalvine dismissed the warning. Vorath was old. His species was cautious to the point of cowardice. The containment accords would proceed. The human children would remain in custody until their people accepted their place in the galactic order. He was certain of this. He was certain right up until the moment, 2 days later, when the 7th Human Expeditionary Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the Shadow Line, and 200 warships pointed their weapons at Council space, and every alarm on Nexaris Prime began to scream. Yet the Shadow Line was an invisible boundary in empty space, a point where Council-controlled territory ended and the unclaimed void began. No treaty defined it. No marker floated there. But every species in the galaxy knew exactly where it was, because crossing it without permission meant war. Admiral Rennick Cole's 7th Fleet did not cross it. They did something worse. They stopped right at the edge, arranged themselves in perfect battle formation, and did absolutely nothing. 212 warships hung in the darkness. Destroyers, cruisers, frigates, carriers, and at the center, the flagship Erebus, a dreadnought so large it had its own gravity field. Their weapons were powered down, their shields were inactive. They simply sat there silent and still, like a wolf watching a rabbit from across a field. When every long-range sensor array on Nexaris Prime locked onto the fleet instantly, Council military commanders flooded Thalvine's office with emergency reports. The human fleet was not advancing, not retreating, not communicating. It was just there, waiting. Then the broadcast came. It was sent on every open frequency, every diplomatic channel, every civilian communication band in the galaxy. Every species on every world with a receiver heard it at the same time. Lyra Voss's face appeared on a billion screens, calm and steady, her dark eyes looking directly into the camera as if she could see every single person watching. "My name is Lyra Voss," she said. 6 days ago, the Galactic Council, under the authority of High Arbiter Thalvine, took my children from the diplomatic quarter of Nexaris Prime. They are 14 years old. They are being held in a detention cell as hostages to force humanity into submission. I am their mother." She paused. The galaxy held its breath. "You are holding my children. You have 72 standard hours to return them unharmed. This is not a negotiation. This is a courtesy." The transmission ended. The effect was immediate. On Nexaris Prime, the Council erupted into chaos. Emergency sessions were called. Ambassadors shouted over each other. Communication systems overloaded as dozens of species tried to contact their homeworlds at the same time. The Dorvani Collective, a federation of plant-like beings who controlled a significant portion of the galactic trade network, withdrew their warships from the Council's Joint Defense Fleet within the first hour. Their ambassador made a brief statement. "We did not join the Council to wage war against a mother seeking her children." The Mirtanis Republic followed, then the Shaloni, then the Pale Assembly. Within 12 hours of Lyra's broadcast, nearly a third of the Council's military strength had evaporated as species pulled their fleets back to their own borders and refused to participate in whatever was coming. Thalvin watched this happen from his office atop the Grand Chamber and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Not fear, not yet, but the first cold touch of doubt. He buried it. He had prepared for human aggression. The Nexaris defense grid, an orbital weapons platform that ringed the entire station, was the most powerful defensive system in the galaxy. It could destroy a fleet 3 times the size of what the humans had brought. He ordered it activated. He tripled the guard on the detention wing. He moved the twins to a deeper level of the station, a hardened section near the reactor core that was designed to survive even if the rest of the station was destroyed. Then he addressed the remaining council members. He stood tall, his black exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber lights, and he spoke with the absolute confidence of a leader who believed he was saving civilization. "This is exactly what I warned you about," he said. "Look at them. One diplomatic action and they send a fleet. One act of political pressure and they threaten the entire galactic order. Humans are predators wearing the skin of diplomats. If we surrender now, if we give them back their hostages and bow to their threats, we will never be able to contain them again. We must hold firm." Some of the remaining delegates nodded. Others looked less certain. Old Councillor Vorath floated in his water sphere at the back of the chamber and said nothing. He had said his piece. The young never listened anyway. What Thalvin did not know, what no one on Nexaris Prime knew, was that the fleet at the Shadow Line was not Lyra's plan. It was her distraction. While every sensor on the station pointed outward at Admiral Cole's warships, a single ship slipped through the darkness from the opposite direction. The Whisper was a stealth frigate, small and fast, coated in materials that absorbed scanner signals like a shadow-absorbing light. It carried a crew of 30, 20 of whom were Nightfall operatives, human special forces soldiers who trained for exactly this kind of mission. Close quarters, enemy territory, no room for error. Lyra Voss stood at the command console of the Whisper and studied the station's layout on her tactical screen. Councillor Mira Zelkis had been busy. Through a series of encrypted messages, the Sithari councillor had provided detailed schematics of Nexaris Prime's interior, including guard rotations, security blind spots, and the location of the detention wing. She had also provided something even more valuable: the access codes to a decommissioned cargo dock on the station's underside, a dock that had been sealed for maintenance and removed from the active security grid. "We dock in 40 minutes, Lyra told her team. "We move fast, we move quiet, and we do not stop until I have my children. Rules of engagement, non-lethal unless lethal is the only option. I want to walk out of this station, not fight my way through it." The team leader, a woman named Torres with scars on her hands and ice in her eyes, nodded. "And if they force the fight?" Lyra looked at her. "Then we finish it." The Whisper glided toward Nexaris Prime like a knife through dark water, invisible to every scanner on the station. Deep inside that same station, Sarah Voss was ready. She had spent 6 days preparing. She knew the guard rotation by heart. She knew the rhythm of the air recycler, the pattern of the lights, the exact moment when the local power nodes stuttered and the gravity field in their cell flickered for half a second. She had mapped everything she could from inside the cell, and she had planned their escape with the patience and precision of someone far older than 14. Kai sat on his cot, watching his sister. He had stopped hitting walls 3 days ago. He had started listening to Sarah instead, and what she told him made him realize that his twin sister was, in her quiet way, the most dangerous person on this station. "The power node stutters every 3 hours and 12 minutes, Sarah said, keeping her voice below a whisper. "When it does, the gravity lock on our door loses power for about 2 seconds. Not long enough for it to open on its own, but long enough for us to force it if we hit the manual release at the exact right moment." She held up the maintenance stylus she had stolen. "This fits the manual release slot. I tested it against the panel edge. It will work." "And after the door?" Kai asked. The guards will be at the corridor junction, 15 meters to the left. We go right. There is a ventilation access panel 9 meters down the hall. I heard the maintenance crew open it on the second day. We go into the vents and head up. I need to reach the communication array on level 40. Why? Because Mom is coming, and she needs to know exactly where we are. Kai stared at his sister. Then a slow grin spread across his face. You are terrifying. You know that, right? I learned from Mom. They waited. The hours crawled. Then Sarah felt it. The familiar subtle shift in the air that meant the power cycle was approaching. She moved to the door and positioned the stylus near the manual release slot. Kai stood behind her, ready to push. The lights flickered. The gravity wavered. Sarah jammed the stylus into the slot and twisted. The door opened. They moved fast and silent. The corridor was dim, lit by emergency strips along the floor. To the left, Sarah could hear the low clicking speech of the Velocari guards at the junction. She grabbed Kai's arm and pulled him right. They ran on the balls of their feet, barely making a sound. 9 meters. The ventilation panel was exactly where Sarah had predicted. Kai pulled it open while Sarah watched the corridor behind them. They climbed inside and pulled the panel shut just as the guard's patrol timer beeped and one of them started walking in their direction. The ventilation system of Nexaris Prime was a maze of metal tunnels that ran through the entire station like veins through a body. Some sections had gravity, some did not. Some were wide enough to walk through, others required crawling on hands and knees. Sarah navigated from memory, counting junctions, feeling the direction of airflow, using every piece of information she had gathered over 6 days of listening and watching. They passed through a zero-gravity shaft that made Kai's stomach flip. They crawled through a section where bioluminescent moss grew on the walls, casting a faint green glow that made everything look alien and strange. At one junction, a maintenance drone floated past them on its patrol route. Kai pressed himself flat against the tunnel wall and held his breath. The drone's scanner light swept past him, and for one terrible second he was sure it had seen him. But the light moved on and the drone continued its path. Kai looked at Sarah. She was already moving. Where they reached the communication array access point 40 minutes later. It was a small technical room filled with equipment that hummed and blinked with constant activity. Sarah sat down at a console and began working. She did not know the alien operating system, but she understood signal transmission principles. Her mother had taught her the basics of emergency communication protocols when she was 10, and Sarah had never forgotten anything in her life. She rigged a short burst transmission on a frequency that only human military equipment would recognize. It contained their exact location inside the station, encoded in a format her mother would know. She sent it and then killed the console to avoid detection. Somewhere below them, in the dark underbelly of Nexaris Prime, the stealth frigate Whisper had just completed its docking sequence. Lyra Voss stepped onto the station's metal floor, her boots making no sound. 20 Nightfall operatives fanned out behind her, moving like shadows. Lyra's wrist display buzzed. She looked down and saw a small data packet, encoded in the emergency format she had taught her daughter years ago. It contained coordinates, a location inside the station. She decoded it in seconds. Her children were alive. They were free of their cell, and they were 7 levels above her. Lyra Voss smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 6 days turning her grief into a weapon, and whose weapon was now ready. She looked at Torres and pointed upward. My daughter says hello. Let's go get them. The team moved into the station. The hunt had become a rescue, and Nexaris Prime had no idea what was walking through its corridors. The first security team never saw them coming. 4 Velocari sentinels guarding a maintenance junction on level 12 heard nothing, saw nothing, and felt nothing until they woke up on the floor with their weapons gone and their communication devices crushed. The Nightfall operatives moved through Nexaris Prime's lower levels like smoke through a ventilation system. They were trained for environments exactly like this: tight corridors, artificial gravity, alien architecture, unfamiliar lighting. Where council species had evolved for open skies, hive coordination, and communal living, humans had evolved in a very different way. They had evolved to hunt in the dark. Lyra led from the front. She had not held a weapon in 6 years, but her hands remembered. Her body remembered. The corridors of Nexarus Prime were unfamiliar, but the rhythm of the operation was as natural to her as breathing. Move, pause, listen. Clear the corner. Move again. She communicated with her team through hand signals, and they responded instantly, a silent conversation between predators working toward a single goal. They reached level 15 and encountered a locked security door. Torres pulled a bypass device from her kit and attached it to the alien locking mechanism. It took 11 seconds to crack. In those 11 seconds, Lyra stood perfectly still, her weapon trained down the corridor behind them, her breathing slow and steady. 11 seconds was a long time in a hostile environment. A lot could go wrong in 11 seconds. Nothing went wrong. The door opened. They moved through. Hanuri, 7 levels above them, Kai and Saravos were crouched in a ventilation junction, waiting. After sending the transmission from the communication array, Sarah had guided them into a section of the vent system that connected the upper and lower halves of the station. They could not go further down without passing through a section that was sealed with security grates, so they had found a junction where 3 tunnels met and created a small space big enough for both of them to sit. Kai was restless. He kept shifting his weight, checking the tunnels, listening for sounds. Sarah sat cross-legged with her eyes closed, running through the station's layout in her mind, calculating distances and times. "She got the signal," Sarah said. "How do you know?" "Because I sent it on the frequency she taught me. Our mom checks that frequency every 30 seconds when she is in the field. She told me that once. I do not think she expected me to remember." Kai shook his head. "You remember everything." "Yes, it is useful." A sound echoed through the ventilation tunnel. Metal on metal, far below them. Footsteps, but not the clicking stride of Velusari sentinels. These were soft, careful, human footsteps. Sarah opened her eyes. "She is here," she whispered. Lyra's team reached level 20 and found the intersection where the vent system connected to the main corridor. Lyra checked her wrist display. Her daughter's signal had come from somewhere above this position. She studied the ceiling, found the ventilation access panel, and tapped on it twice. Pause. 3 times. Pause. Once. And it was a pattern she had taught her children when they were small, a family code, silly and simple, something from a game they used to play in the garden on Earth. Knock, knock. "Who is there?" "Us." From inside the vent, 2 knocks came back. Pause. 3. Pause. 1. Lyra reached up and opened the panel. 2 faces looked down at her. Kai's eyes were wide and bright with relief. Sarah's were calm and steady, as if she had known exactly when and where this moment would happen. Lyra reached in and pulled them down, one at a time. She held them. For exactly 3 seconds, she was not a commander. She was not a strategist. She was not the woman who had mobilized a fleet and infiltrated a space station. She was a mother holding her children, and the universe was very small and very warm. Then she let go. She checked Kai's neck where the stunner had hit him. She looked at Sarah's wrist where the sentinels had gripped her. Bruises, nothing broken. They were thin and tired but unharmed. She handed Kai a sidearm from her belt. He took it without hesitation. His hands were steady. She gave Sarah a tactical data pad loaded with the station schematics Zelkas had provided. Sarah glanced at it for 5 seconds and nodded. "Stay behind me," Lyra said. "Move when I move. Stop when I stop. We are leaving this station." On the command level of Nexarus Prime, alarms began to wail. A security officer burst into Thalvine's office. "High Arbiter, the human children are gone. The detention cell is empty. The guards were not alerted. We believe they escaped through the ventilation system." Thalvine rose from his chair so fast that his forearms knocked a display screen from his desk. "How long?" "We estimate at least 2 hours. We are scanning the vent system now, but it is extensive. There are thousands of possible routes. Lock down the entire station, every door, every corridor, every docking port. Activate the full security grid. Find them." The officer hesitated. "There is something else, High Arbiter. We have detected an unauthorized ship docked at cargo port 7 on the lower ring. It is not on any registry. The port was supposed to be sealed." Thalvine's compound eyes widened. For the first time since the crisis began, Real fear crawled into his mind. The children had not just escaped. Someone had come for them. He activated a direct channel to Admiral Cole at the shadow line. Cole's scarred face appeared on the screen, calm and unreadable. "Admiral," Thalvine said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "withdraw your fleet immediately, or I will activate the Nyxeris defense grid and destroy every ship at the shadow line." Cole looked at him for a long moment. Then he leaned forward slightly in his chair. "You are pointing a gun at my fleet," Cole said. "Let me tell you what Commander Voss once told me. A gun only works if the person you are aiming at is afraid to die." His expression did not change. His voice did not waver. "Fire when ready." He cut the channel. Thalvine stared at the blank screen. He had expected anger. He had expected threats and counter-threats and the usual dance of military intimidation. He had not expected a man to look at 200 potential deaths and simply say, "Go ahead." In the council war chamber below, the remaining delegates were falling apart. News of the children's escape had spread through the station within minutes, carried by whispered conversations and panicked communication signals. The fact that humans had infiltrated the most secure station in the galaxy without being detected was terrifying enough. The fact that they had done it while a fleet sat at the border, drawing every eye outward, suggested a level of strategic thinking that most species had not believed humans capable of. The old aquatic counselor Vorath finally spoke again. His bioluminescent body pulsed with deep blue light as he addressed the chamber from his water sphere. "I withdraw my species from the Galactic Council," he said. His voice was ancient and tired and final. "We join this body to prevent wars, not to kidnap children and start them. I will not be part of what comes next." He turned his sphere and floated toward the exit. 3 more delegations stood and followed him. On level 22, Lyra's team hit the first real resistance. A full squad of 12 Velusari sentinels had set up a barricade across the main corridor leading to the lower docking ring. They had energy barriers, heavy weapons, and armored positions. It was a serious defensive line, the kind that was supposed to stop an assault force. The Nightfall operatives went through it in 90 seconds. Torres and her team flanked from 2 side corridors simultaneously. Flash charges blinded the Sentinels' compound eyes, which were more sensitive to light than human eyes. In the moment of confusion, the operatives moved in. Close quarters combat at speed, precise and controlled, targeting weapon hands and joints. The Velusari were strong and their exoskeletons were tough, but humans were faster at this distance and their training was brutal. One by one, the Sentinels went down. Non-lethal, as Lyra had ordered. Broken weapons, disabled limbs, neural stunners turned against their owners. One Sentinel managed to fire his weapon before he was taken down. The energy bolt scorched the wall a meter from where Kai was standing. The boy did not flinch. He looked at the burn mark on the wall, then at the Sentinel on the floor, and then he looked at his mother. Lyra had already moved past it. "Keep moving," she said. They pushed through 2 more security cordons on the way down. Each one fell faster than the last as the operatives found their rhythm. Somewhere in the station's security command center, a Velusari officer was watching helmet camera footage from the fallen guards. Watching humans move through his station with the terrifying coordination of a species that had evolved to hunt in groups, that communicated without words, that could read each other's movements and intentions with a precision that no alien species could match. "They are not even using their full strength," the officer whispered to no one. "They are holding back." On level 8, Counselor Mara Zelkis made her move. She had been waiting in a service corridor near the main power distribution center, watching the chaos unfold on her personal display. She had made her decision days ago in that small cell, when a 14-year-old girl had looked at her and told her to pick a side. Zelkis entered her council override codes into the power distribution panel and triggered a cascading failure across the detention wing and the 3 levels above it. Lights went out, security doors unlocked, surveillance cameras died. The entire section of the station went dark and blind. In the confusion, she sent one final message to the council's secure network. "I resign my seat. History will judge us all. I prefer to be judged for what I did, not for what I allowed." Then she disappeared into the dark corridors, heading for the lower docking ring and the human ship she knew was waiting there. The blackout was the final piece. Lyra's team moved through the darkened levels without slowing down. Humans could fight in the dark. They had done it for 100,000 years before they ever reached the stars. Night vision equipment helped, but even without it, they would have managed. They were built for this. They reached the Whisper at docking port 7. Torres went aboard first to secure the ship. The operatives filed in behind her, taking defensive positions. Kai and Sarah climbed through the airlock, and Sarah immediately moved to a console and began monitoring station security frequencies, translating the alien chatter for the crew. Zelkis arrived last, breathing hard, her green scales dark with stress. Lyra met her at the airlock. "Thank you," Lyra said. 2 words, simple, but from Lyra Voss, they carried the weight of a debt that would not be forgotten. Zelkis nodded. "Go. Get your children home." Lyra walked to the command console as the Whisper's engines powered up. The docking clamps released. The stealth frigate slid out of the port and into open space, invisible to every scanner on the station. As the ship cleared the station's outer ring, Lyra opened a single communication channel, not to the Council, not to the fleet, to Thalveen directly, on his personal frequency. "I have my children," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, without anger, without triumph, without anything except a simple statement of fact. "What you do next determines whether you keep your station." She closed the channel. At the shadow line, Admiral Cole received a 2-word message from the Whisper. "Package secured." He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes for one moment, and allowed himself to feel the relief he had been holding back for days. Then he opened his eyes and gave an order. Every weapon system on every ship in the 7th Fleet powered up at the same time. 212 warships lit up like stars. The energy signature was so massive that sensor arrays 3 star systems away detected it. The courtesy period was over. Now came the reckoning. The 7th Fleet held its position at the shadow line for 3 days after Lyra Voss extracted her children from Nexaris Prime. 212 warships with every weapon system active, every shield at full power, every fighter squadron on standby. They did not advance. They did not retreat. They waited, and in their waiting, they said everything that needed to be said. The galaxy watched. Every species, every government, every intelligence agency, every news network across 40 civilizations tracked the standoff in real time. The footage of Lyra's broadcast played on repeat. Her words echoed through a billion conversations on a billion worlds. "You have 72 hours. This is not a negotiation. This is a courtesy." Mothers on alien worlds who had never seen a human before understood those words perfectly. Parents understood, and slowly, quietly, the opinion of the galaxy shifted. On Nexaris Prime, High Arbiter Thalveen watched his power crumble. In the first 24 hours after the extraction, 12 species formally withdrew from the Galactic Council. Their ambassadors packed their offices, recalled their staff, and left the station on their own ships. Some made public statements condemning Thalveen's actions. The others simply left without a word, which was somehow worse. The grand corridors of the Council Quarter, once crowded with delegates from across the galaxy, grew empty and quiet. The Dorvani Collective announced that all trade agreements negotiated through the Council were suspended until new leadership was established. Since the Dorvani controlled nearly 40% of the galactic trade network, this single action sent economic shockwaves through every remaining Council world. Markets crashed, supply chains broke. Species that had supported Thalveen out of political convenience suddenly found that convenience had a very high price. Military support evaporated even faster. The Joint Council Defense Fleet, once a combined force of over 1,000 ships from dozens of species, each shrank to a fraction of its former size as fleet after fleet withdrew to their own borders. The Nexaris defense grid, Thalveen's ultimate weapon, still orbited the station with enough firepower to destroy the human fleet. But a defense grid needed crews, and half of those crews belonged to species that no longer answered to the Council. Thalveen called emergency session after emergency session. He stood at the central dais of the Grand Chamber and argued, demanded, threatened, and pleaded. He told the remaining delegates that humanity's aggression proved everything he had warned about. He told them that surrendering now would make the Council look weak. He told them that the containment accords were the only way to ensure galactic stability. The chamber, once home to 40 delegations, now held fewer than 20. Those who remained looked at him with something between pity and contempt. An elderly delegate from the Shaloni hegemony, a species of slow-moving, armored beings known for their blunt honesty, finally said what everyone was thinking. "High Arbiter, you told us that humans were dangerous and needed to be contained. Then you kidnapped their children to prove your point. You did not contain them. You confirmed every fear they have ever had about us and gave them a reason to use their full strength. You are not the leader who protected the council from humanity. You are the fool who made an enemy of them." Thalveen had no answer. For the first time in his political career, he stood at the dais with nothing to say. While the council collapsed from within, Lyra Voss arrived at the 7th Fleet's flagship, the Erebus, Arshu with her children and her team. The stealth frigate Whisper docked in the massive ship's main hangar, and when the airlock opened, Lyra stepped out onto the deck to find Admiral Cole waiting for her. He looked at the twins. Kai stood tall, trying to look brave, a sidearm still holstered at his hip. Sarah stood beside him with her tactical data pad under her arm, already composing a detailed report of everything she had observed on Nexaris Prime. Every guard rotation, every security system, every weakness in the station's infrastructure. She intended to deliver it to Fleet Intelligence before dinner. Cole looked at them for a long moment, and then he did something that surprised the entire hangar crew. The scarred, hardened admiral knelt down and pulled both children into his arms. He held them tightly. When he let go, his eyes were red. "Hey, your mother is insane," he said, "and I am very glad she is on our side." Lyra put her hand on Cole's shoulder. No words, none were needed. That evening, Lyra stood on the bridge of the Erebus and prepared a second broadcast. This one would be different from the first. The first had been a warning. This one would be a lesson. She transmitted on the same open frequencies as before. Every species, every world, every station. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy once more. She was still calm. She was still steady. But there was something different in her eyes now. Not anger, not victory. Something deeper. Something that made every being watching feel, for just a moment, very small. 9 days ago, the Galactic Council took my children, she said. They did this because they believed it would make humanity afraid. They believed that by holding what we love, they could control what we do. They were wrong, she paused. I am not here to threaten you. I am not here to declare war. I am here to explain something that the Council failed to understand, and that I hope the rest of the galaxy will learn from what has happened. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle, and that made it more powerful than any shout. You believe that because humans smile, we are soft. Because we offer peace, we are weak. Because we love our children, we are vulnerable. You were wrong on all 3 counts. We smile because we choose to. We offer peace because we know what the alternative costs. And we love our children, which is exactly why you should never ever touch them. She leaned forward slightly. We came to the stars with open hands. We asked to join your community as equals. We traded fairly. We kept our treaties. We respected your borders. And in return, a man in a position of power decided that our goodwill was weakness and that our children were tools. Her expression hardened, just slightly, just enough. Let this be the last time anyone in this galaxy makes that mistake. The broadcast ended. The silence that followed lasted a long time. On Nexaris Prime, the end came not with a battle, but with a ceremony. The Velusari had an ancient ritual called the shedding. It was reserved for leaders who had brought shame upon their species, a public stripping of identity so complete that the individual ceased to exist in the eyes of their people. It had not been performed in over 300 years. Thalveen's own species turned against him. The Velusari Grand Matriarch, the oldest and highest-ranking member of their civilization, traveled to Nexaris Prime specifically for this purpose. In a brief, devastating ceremony in the now mostly empty Grand Chamber, Thalveen was stripped of his title, his rank, and his name. His exoskeleton was marked with the chemical scent of exile, a signal that no Velusari would ever speak to him, assist him, or acknowledge his existence again. He walked out of the Grand Chamber for the last time as no one. The few delegates still present watched him go. None of them felt sorry for him. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy rebuilt itself. Not easily and not quickly, but with the slow, painful honesty of civilizations that had been forced to look at themselves and did not entirely like what they saw. A new agreement was proposed, and not a council in the old sense, not a body where powerful species made rules for weaker ones, but something different. They called it the Galactic Compact. It was built on a simple principle. No species would have authority over another, no hostages, no containment, no accords written in fear. Disputes would be resolved through negotiation between equals, and any species that violated another's sovereignty would face the collective response of all the others. Humanity was offered a founding seat at the table, not as a controlled member, not as a species to be watched and managed, but as an equal architect of the new order. Ambassador Dren Voss, restored to his position with a formal apology from every remaining species, represented humanity at the signing ceremony. He stood at the podium and looked out at the delegates, with many of them new faces replacing those who had supported Thalvin. He spoke briefly. "My family paid a price for this moment," he said. "I hope, for all our sakes, that no family ever has to pay it again." Councillor Mira Zelkis, who had been granted asylum by the human government, attended the ceremony as an independent observer. She sat in the gallery and watched the signing with her golden eyes, and she thought about a 14-year-old girl in a detention cell who had told her to pick a side. She had picked well. The twins returned to Earth on a military transport, escorted by half the 7th Fleet. They landed at the same spaceport where their mother had departed 12 days earlier, and they walked off the ship into a crowd of people who had been following the crisis on every news channel for nearly 2 weeks. Niskai handled the attention exactly the way everyone expected. He smiled, waved, and told anyone who would listen about the ventilation shafts, the zero-gravity tunnels, and the moment his mother handed him a weapon and told him to keep up. He was 14 and had just lived through the greatest adventure of his life, and he was going to talk about it forever. Sarah handled it differently. She said almost nothing to the reporters. She shook the hands she was expected to shake and answered the questions she was expected to answer, but her mind was already somewhere else. That night in her room, she opened a blank journal and began to write. She wrote about the station, the aliens she had met, the languages she had heard, the political systems she had observed. And she wrote about Councillor Zelkis and the look in her golden eyes when she decided to risk everything. She wrote about old Vorath floating in his water sphere, tired and wise and sad. She did not show the journal to anyone, but she kept writing in it every night for the rest of her life. On a quiet evening, 3 weeks after the crisis, Lyra Voss stood in her garden on Earth. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Her commander's uniform was back in the locked room upstairs, hung neatly on its stand. The door was locked again. She hoped it would stay that way. Dren came out of the house carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to her and stood beside her, looking at the sunset. They stood together in comfortable silence for a while. When the kind of silence that only comes from decades of knowing someone so well that words are optional. "Do you think they understand now?" Dren asked. Lyra sipped her tea. She watched the last light fade from the sky and thought about her children sleeping safely in their rooms, about the galaxy spinning slowly overhead, full of species and civilizations and beings who were all trying, in their own ways, to figure out how to live together. "They are beginning to," she said, "and that will have to be enough, for now." The stars came out one by one, filling the sky with cold, ancient light. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Compact was taking its first uncertain steps. Somewhere out there, species that had feared humanity were starting to understand them. And somewhere out there, in the deep black emptiness between galaxies, in a place where no living ship had ever traveled, an ancient sensor array that was older than any known civilization activated for the first time in 100,000 years. It had been placed there long ago by builders whose names had been forgotten before the first council was ever formed. It was designed to watch, to wait, and to listen for a very specific signal. Not a radio wave, not a transmission, something deeper. Something written into the behavior patterns of a species. A signature that only appeared when a civilization crossed a certain threshold of capability, adaptability, and sheer stubborn refusal to be destroyed. The array's ancient processors analyzed the data they had collected. They compared it against criteria that had been programmed into them before the stars they orbited had even formed. What the analysis took less than a second. A single entry appeared in a log that had been empty for millennia. It was written in a language that no living species could read, a language that belonged to builders who had watched the galaxy grow from dust and had left their tools behind when they moved on to whatever came next. Translated loosely, the entry said, "Apex predator species confirmed. Observation protocol engaged." The array settled back into its patient silence and continued to watch. It had been waiting for a very long time. It could wait a little longer.